Are you wanting to build a home gym? Well, sorry to tell you, it's likely about to get much more expensive. Today I'm going to walk through the potential price increases that we could see here in the beautiful USA for home gym equipment specifically. Hey guys, it's Coop from Garage Gym Reviews. Today I'm talking about gym equipment pricing. I want to make clear this is not a political video. I review gym equipment. I'm not here to tell you who I voted for, but I am here to tell you because it intersects potentially tariffs with gym equipment pricing and therefore with people building home gyms, how that could affect you. So first off, I want to define tariffs before we walk into tariffs and how they're going to affect. You got to know what they are. Tariffs are essentially a tax that countries put on products being imported from one country to another. So an example of this is basically you buy a bumper plate, most of them are made in China, you buy that in China, the company itself that's importing that, let's say Rep Fitness or Bells of Steel, French Sport, Rogue imports bumper plates from China, let's say they import that from China, they're gonna have to pay a tariff or a tax on importing that from that country to here. The idea behind it, I mean, this is the proposed idea, is you increase tariffs so you increase production in the US. At least that's what it seems like. Also, I basically emailed most gym equipment manufacturer owners and talked to them and asked them how they felt like it could affect pricing in the future. I'll speak to some of those today and kind of give you basically an outlook on what you're going to be looking at for the next few years, in my opinion. So before I get into kind of what I'm seeing and what companies I've talked to are seeing, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think is going to happen in the future with gym equipment, and where is kind of some of this off or on of what I'm saying? First off, I want to introduce you to a friend. This friend's name is Fred. Okay, Fred is the Federal Reserve Economic Data website. Basically, this is a graph. They named it Fred because they wanted it to be very friendly. Have you ever met a Fred you didn't like? I haven't. I haven't met many Freds actually. But this is essentially specifically for gymnasium and exercise equipment. This is the PPI, Producer Price Index. Basically, this tells us how have prices increased or decreased over time here in the US for producers of specifically gym equipment. This isn't necessarily going to tell us everything we need to know for the future, but I do think it gives us some ideas on where prices have gone, and it can be surprising and where prices may go. To those of you that are wondering, why does this matter? Well, a Churchill quote, those that fail to learn history are doomed to repeat it in the future. We need to look at history so we have an idea, specifically on this one, like where price has been. And this, for some of you that were thinking about buying gym equipment and building a home gym maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago and are now like, oh, I wish I would have done that. These prices are like, it's bonkers. But basically, we see a few things. As you can see on this graph, it is a trend line up. It's quite a bit of increases. I'm not gonna go through a lot of the old ones. You can see for a while it was pretty flat. 2008, we saw a little bit of a jump. That could have been related to the recession. 2016, we see about a 5% jump in pricing. I don't think this is necessarily due to major tariffs affecting fitness equipment from China because those really came more later on in 2018. Then 2020, this is where we see like a massive increase. This is where it's basically hockey sticked. It's just gone up tremendously, and that was due to the pandemic. So you can understand this. Demand was extremely high, supply was extremely low, supply chains were wrecked. Basically, if you were around at that time, you remember. You couldn't even find gym equipment if you wanted it. And you could sell just about anything. I remember people price gouging on Facebook Marketplace for like the worst gym equipment. Crazy prices on crappy gym equipment and weight, and people bought it because there was nothing else. So we saw producer prices increase also because suppliers were hard, like it was hard to find people supplying equipment, just supply chains were wrecked. You would think that you would see the prices come back down to normal levels because suddenly supply chains have figured it out. Well, that's not the case, my friends. Basically, from there on out, that's the pricing we see. And honestly, I don't really expect a lot lower prices in the future. This is kind of the idea where for the foreseeable future, a lot of times if you're wanting to purchase something, it's gonna cost you less today than it will 5, 10 years from now. So this is why I'm constantly urging people to build home gyms now One, because they're a durable good. If you're buying cast iron plates, it's not like over time they fade or break down or anything like that. They basically are what they are, and they're gonna be cheaper now than they are in the future. But let's get into something that I think matters more so for the future, and that is tariffs. What a dirty word, tariffs. Now, something I want everybody to understand, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, is Trump introduced a 7.5% tariff, but Biden left the tariff in. So it's not necessarily a partisan issue. In some way, it's bipartisan. Although Trump introduced the tariff, Biden didn't take it away. 7.5% has been the tariffs. The tariff still exists, and it's 7.5% to 12% is what companies are paying to import their gym equipment from China. Now, here's the outlook and kind of what we've seen on proposed tariffs. And be honest, into talking to gym equipment company owners, it's basically been like, we're not gonna change anything yet because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. Everything is speculation at this point. So this is what's been proposed. One is a 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico. Now you may be thinking that doesn't really matter because most imported gym equipment is from China. It's not coming from Canada or Mexico. The problem is many raw materials come specifically from Canada, and specifically steel. There's a time there where Rogue was getting some Canadian supplied steel. They thought it was US supplied steel. So on their site, they had to list, basically this is a mixed material steel. It could be US, it could be Canadian, because they used to say it was all US sourced steel. I think they've corrected that issue since, but a lot of steel comes from Canada. And if steel comes from Canada, and there is an import on that steel, that can still increase the price. Then the other one that I think companies are more considering is there's two potentials here. One, an additional 10% tariff on Chinese imported goods. So this would be additional on what's already there. Just so you know, if you went into just about any home gym, most of the gym equipment that's in there is imported from China. There is equipment that is made in the US. An example of this is a lot of this equipment you see behind me. If you'd like to see a review, make sure you subscribe because it's forthcoming. But one thing that you gotta realize is this is not just US supplied either. The uprights and most of the metal components, they're made in the US, but the aluminum pulleys, they even say on their site, they are imported. So it's not a completely US made good. They're gonna have to pay tariffs on some of those pulleys and some of that stuff on a mixed made good too. So those are things to consider. Now, one comment Trump made quite a while ago, he's made other comments after this that were lower, but he was asked basically by a Fox News person, essentially that there was a report that Trump was considering 60% tariffs on Chinese imported goods, and is that something that he's actually gonna put in place? And he said, no, I actually think I may do even higher than that.
You're talking about 60% tariffs on Chinese goods. Is that in the cards?
No, I would say maybe it's gonna be more than that.
So there's a lot of numbers that have been proposed. Basically, Pete Keller, who is the owner of Fringe Sport, made a video in our Facebook group, I think really detailing why tariffs matter and what the potential costs could be in the short term for people buying gym equipment. Let's watch it and I'll react to it. Okay, Pete, tell us about tariffs.
The existing tariff on most of the products that are being brought in and sold to you guys as barbells, squat racks, weight plates, all that stuff is at about 12.1%, which is in itself a tariff hike from Trump's first administration. So prior to the tariff hike, the tariff on this stuff was actually 4.6%. Let's assume that we've got a product that is being sold for $100. That probably costs the company that is selling it to you about $40 in China. They then have to get it to the US in order to ship it to you. And so the inbound freight on an ocean container is maybe $5 on that. And then there is the duty. So the duty is not paid on this $5 here, it's paid on this $40 here, and it's paid at a rate of 12.1%. And that tariff goes to the US government. The importer, AKA me, I'm paying that amount to the US government. So 12.1% times $40 is $4.84 for the duty. So the landed cost in this case is $49.84. That product is being sold to you, the customer, for $100. That means that the gross margin on that product is about $50.16.
He goes on, this is a great video if you'd like to see it. We'll put a link below the like button. You're gonna have to join the Facebook group basically to see it. It's in the home gym community. But then he goes on and basically shows, okay, what happens if it's a 60% tariff? He's estimating that the increase in price towards people buying the equipment is 38%. He then goes on to show a 200% tariff, which I'm not sure where he's getting the 200% tariff. I don't know if he's just like, this is absolute worst case scenario, but essentially it's gonna have to increase by 150% is what the cost of the goods they're selling is going to go towards the consumer. So if you're thinking like, tariffs aren't gonna affect me in the short term on gym equipment, well, they probably are. He also though goes on to show the US price increase. So what he's saying is basically just because equipment is bought in the US, so people thinking like instead of buying imported gym equipment, this is just gonna make US gym equipment cheaper. This is his argument against that.
And here's a quick reason for why you're going to see those price increases from the US manufacturers. So pre-pandemic, inflation in the US was at 2%, give or take, year over year. And then of course we had all this pandemic inflation.
Watch the whole video. He goes on to talk about how inflation is increasing. He then goes to Chinese and foreign components. Basically, he's saying just because you buy some in the US doesn't mean it's wholly made or sourced in the US. An example of this is this rack. There are things on this that tariffs will increase the price of. Or another one is bumper plates. Bumper plates are almost all made overseas because the actual conditions to make bumper plates are so horrendous that you can't even make them in the US because agencies won't allow it because the conditions are so bad. Basically, he's saying like there's still gonna be stuff that's made in the US that's gonna feature foreign components and it's gonna increase costs too. He also talks about the substitution effect. Basically, if one price increases, so we have two options. The imported option is $100, the USA made option is $120. If the $100 option, the imported option, increases in price because it has to due to tariffs, the USA made option that was already more, let's say they become even at $120, the substitution effect basically says that if they increase the price to the same percentage more than what their competitor already was, that they can sell the same amount of goods. Now that would require a company to recognize that and decide to increase their pricing, but he's basically saying like companies in the US could do that and still sell the same amount they were prior. And then he says must make margins is his last one. Basically, the companies have margins they have to make to operate as a business. And so that plays into price increases. He gives the example actually of this rack showing like over time it's increased in price and basically says like, they probably had to increase the price because they had must make margins. They came out at a lower price to compete probably with the Aris 2.0 and then over time they had to increase it because they had to make the margins. Are there ways around this? So I talked to some of the company owners basically asking a similar question. The response I got was essentially the amount of time, energy, capital, just resource that it costs to build a supply chain is ridiculous, and you can't just quickly move that. Because if you go from producing something, say in one country at one factory, and you decide, oh, suddenly I'm gonna have this product that the customer knows and loves and has come to expect a certain level of quality on, I'm now gonna transition and move that all the way over to this country, these factories, with these people. It just doesn't really work like that. Supply chains take years to invest in and build. So companies often will just pay the tariff because they pretty much have to because they built their supply chain. So one thing that I know some companies that I've talked to have said is like, they're just waiting for specific guidelines on where it's gonna go. I do wanna give a breakdown of some of the other companies that I've talked to. I'm not gonna give their names. Most of them asked to be anonymous. And nearly all of them were like, yes, if tariffs increase, depending on the percentage, it could really, really affect pricing in the US. Now, many of them also said there's a lot of economic factors that matter here. It's not like you just introduce tariffs. There's nothing else that's gonna play a part. And depending on the increase in tariffs, some of them said that many of the suppliers in China can swallow that in some way, and therefore it may not have as big of an effect. But understand, the bigger the tariff, the greater the price increase. And it matters for you because basically home gym pricing could increase. Now, what do you do with this information? Basically, if you agree with the argument, this is probably what you should do with the argument. If you're looking to buy gym equipment, I would hedge and say that for the short term, prices are likely going to increase. Now, I'm not giving an opinion on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing long term for the US. That's not the argument here. I'm just saying in the short term, what should you do with that? And you may say I'm very biased, but I would say buy gym equipment now. Like if prices are going to increase to the point that some of these people are saying with the tariffs, it may be best to buy equipment now that you're interested in while prices are still where they're at. So if you're looking to build a home gym, my response is now is the time, which has pretty much always been my response. Home gyms are not just dollars and cents. You don't buy a home gym just based off the price. You buy it for so many other reasons. But if you're somebody that's on a budget looking to save, like it may now be the time to bite the bullet, and this is the time to buy gym equipment. Now, I would like to hear from you in the comments. Do you agree with these premises? Where is maybe Pete off? Where am I off? Is there something that I'm missing? I'm trying to understand where this is going and what to expect on pricing. I'd love to hear from you. Many of you, I'm sure there's some people that are economists or really deep into finance, have better ideas on this, where some of this is off and also where some of this is on. Let me know in the comments. This has been Coop from Garage Gym Reviews. I'll see you next time. Peace.